Jesus instructed the 12, saying, "A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they malign those of his household? So, have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, utter in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim upon the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground without your Father's will. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. So, everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me, and he who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it."
In the days when I was lecturing at a theological college, there was an exercise I used to do with my students which seemed innocuous enough, but which was guaranteed to make them really annoyed. I'd put them into small groups and ask them to come up with some words or short sentences that summed up for them the very essence of the message of Jesus. And when we came back together to compare results, the groups had always come up with some pretty similar answers, which were generally some variation of the following. Jesus demonstrated the boundless love of God for all. He brought peace and love and reconciliation into the world. He healed broken lives and broken relationships. So far, so good. But I would then set before them the passage that we heard in our gospel reading just a moment ago, in which Jesus says this: "Do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I've come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes will be those of his own household." Okay, I would say to them, so what about this passage? How does this saying of Jesus fit with all that you've just told me? Their response was revealing, because following a rather awkward silence, it became clear that most of them were not only very rattled by what I'd done in confronting them with this biblical passage, but that some of them were actually quite angry, because they didn't know the answer, and it was such an uncomfortable passage for them, appearing to contradict everything that they believed and held dear, that they really didn't want to be reminded that it was there. So they reacted with extreme annoyance when I obliged them to look at it. And this very perplexing gospel passage is in fact just one of a number of biblical texts in the New Testament, sometimes referred to as the hard sayings of Jesus. Hard both in the sense that they are difficult to understand, and also because they seem so harsh and uncompromising. They include those bewildering passages in which Jesus says things like, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple." So what on earth are we to make of passages like these? Some years ago, a friend of mine told me the following story. Her husband had been appointed to a new job working for a major national organisation. The particular office where he went to work had a very genial atmosphere. Many of his new colleagues had worked there for years and were very comfortable there. However, it did not take him long to discover that it was also an environment in which a good deal of what one might describe as low-level corruption was rife. Corners were cut, expenses were fiddled, statistics were routinely massaged. One employee routinely went off sick every time there was a test match at the major cricket venue nearby, and much else besides. And all of these practices were fully known about and accepted by the other office staff, who just regarded it as the norm. It was just how it was. And they all rubbed along together very nicely, covering for one another whenever the need arose. But my friend's husband, newly arrived, found all of this both uncomfortable and troubling. He didn't make a scene, nor did he threaten to report any of this malpractice, but he also refused to collude with it. And that simple fact served to divide the office staff completely down the middle. On the one side, there were the 2 or 3 employees who had long felt that what was going on in the office was wrong, but who had felt unable to make any kind of stance, so had just kept their heads down. Now, for the first time, they felt confident enough to voice their own feelings of unease. And alongside them were those who had simply never questioned the prevailing office culture before, nor looked at their own conduct self-critically, but who were now uncomfortably aware that what they were doing was unacceptable and needed to change. But on the other side were those office staff who were angry and resentful. How dare this newcomer disturb the comfortable little world that they'd created around them? And more than that, his need for honest and truthfulness was exposing their own malpractice and theft for what it truly was, even though he was not being actively confrontational at all. He was simply conducting himself according to a different set of principles, which put theirs into sharp relief. Because people do not like being exposed in that way. I suspect that many of us know the truth of that from our own experience. We are inclined to regard those aspects of our behaviour that are less than edifying as being no more than harmless foibles. We certainly don't like our weaknesses or our bad behaviour to be exposed, not least because that requires us to look squarely and honestly at our own failings and shortcomings, which can be profoundly uncomfortable. And when our failings or our negligence or our bad conduct are brought into the light of day, we have a choice. We can respond by acknowledging our shortcomings and setting out to change how we act and what we are, or we can resist by responding with resentment and anger. During my many years of ministry, I have on more than one occasion seen an individual whose negligence or malpractice has been exposed respond with aggression, sometimes active aggression, the issuing of counter-threats or confrontational behaviour, or passive aggression, blocking, non-compliant conduct, or the spreading of inaccurate and misleading information to deflect attention from what is really going on. But I think it is that kind of example that helps us to understand what lies at the heart of this morning's rather perplexing gospel reading. Because Jesus brings judgment. Sometimes he does so very directly and overtly, the overturning of the moneylenders' tables in the temple being a classic example of this. But he also did so in a much more significant but subtle way, because Jesus brought judgment simply by being. His own integrity of life, his refusal to collude with the harmful and life-denying assumptions and practices of his culture and its religion, made many of his contemporaries, especially the religious authorities, very angry indeed, because the light that he shone into the lives of those whom he encountered revealed the extent of the darkness within them. And there were those who did not like that one bit. Which explains why it is that in the Gospels people react to the presence of Jesus in such extreme ways. Either they give the whole of their lives to him, dropping what they're doing and following him regardless of the consequences, because they recognise the amazing and life-transforming gift of love and peace and freedom that he brings, or they set about trying to destroy him, because what he threatens to expose strikes terror into their hearts. And that is why Jesus warns his followers that his coming will divide a man from his father, a daughter from her mother, a daughter-in-law from her mother-in-law, not because he's on a mission to destroy family life, of course he isn't, but rather because human beings, when confronted with the presence of light and truth, a light and truth that threatens to reveal everything, sometimes react in extreme ways to try to prevent it. And Jesus knew that. So, how do we respond to the challenge of Christ's presence, the shining light that illuminates the darkest parts of our own lives? Are we courageous enough to recognise the power of his light and his love, and so ask for his forgiveness and his grace? Or do we reject the source of that light that will always threaten to bring to light the most uncomfortable truths? I wonder. Amen.